I invite you to listen to the gospel of Jesus Christ according to Mark.
Glory to you, O Lord.
If any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for you if a great millstone were hung around your neck and you were thrown into the sea. This is the good news.
Praise be to you, O Christ.
So it is Mother's Day, and that is our scripture. I have to admit to you all right off the bat, I've been thinking about this sermon for months. I've read a ton of great stuff this week, and I've personally experienced some profound situations. I really have so many ideas floating around in my head, so much material, so many directions. It was really difficult. I really had to work hard this week to keep my message cohesive, to hold it all together as one message. And after much thought, prayer, cutting, pasting, and considering of seemingly unrelated paragraphs, each such a jewel, I finally came to this as the heart of my message for today. I think we all do a lot of tossing about stumbling blocks. We toss them here, there, and everywhere. We cause so much stumbling with our own participation in and our silent complicitness of our culture's idolatrous obsession with perfection. I'll say that again. I think we cause so much stumbling with our own participation in and our own silent complicitness of our culture's idolatrous obsession with perfection. Even today's holiday. When we peel back a few layers, we see how it reveals this cultural priority. Anne Lamott writes about how Mother's Day perpetuates the dangerous idea that all parents are somehow superior to non-parents. In an article titled, "Why I Hate Mother's Day," Anne, who is a mother herself, goes on to write, "Don't get me wrong. There were times I could have literally died of love for my son, and I felt stoned on his rich, desperate love for me. But I bristle at the whispered lie that you can only know this level of love and self-sacrifice if you are a parent. 98% of American parents secretly feel that if you have not had and raised a child, your capacity to love is somehow diminished. 98% of American parents secretly believe that non-parents cannot possibly know what it is to love unconditionally, to be selfless, to put yourself at risk for a greater loss. We live in a world where the good parents help their children to avoid failure at all costs. A lengthy article by Hera Estroff-Marano, called "A Nation of Wimps," goes into great detail about how this trend in parenting has consequences. Avoidance of failure starts with the good parents, even on the playground, now all rubber-cushioned surfaces where kids used to skin their knees. And wait a minute, those aren't just little kids playing, they're mommies, and especially their daddies, are right in there with them, co-play or play-by-play coaching. Then there are the sanitizing gels, with which over a third of parents now send their children to school with. Presumably, parents now worry that school bathrooms are not good enough for their children. Behold, the wholly sanitized childhood. without a skinned knee or even an occasional C in history. But this extreme avoidance of failure does not even stop at the typical marks we would traditionally assume: high school graduation or turning 18. Morano continues, talk to a college president or administrator and you're almost certainly bound to hear the tales of the parent who calls at 2 a.m. to protest Brandon's C in economics because it's going to damage his shot at grad school. Morano tells this story. Shortly after Robert Epstein announced to his university students that he expected them to work hard and would hold them to high standards, he heard from a parent on official judicial stationery asking how he could dare mistreat the young. Epstein, former editor-in-chief of Psychology Today, eventually filed a complaint with the California Commission on Judicial Misconduct, and the judge was censured for abusing his office, but not before he wreaked havoc on the psychology department of UC San Diego. Sadly, all the consequences of this good parenting are turning out to not be so good. Morano first discusses the logic we all know in our hearts. Kids need to feel badly sometimes. We learn through experience, and we learn through bad experience. Through failure, we learn how to cope. Messing up, however, even in the playground, is wildly out of style. Although error and experimentation are the true mothers of success. Parents are taking pains to remove failure from the equation, taking all the discomforts, disappointments, and even the play out of development. With few challenges all their own, kids are unable to forge their creative adaptations to the regular ups and downs of life. This not only makes them scared of taking chances, it makes them psychologically fragile, riddled with anxiety. In the process, they're robbed of identity, meaning, a sense of accomplishment. And forget too about perseverance, not simply a moral virtue, but a necessary life skill. Whether we want to or not, we're on our way to creating a nation of wimps, Morano concludes. Very scary to read is Morano's detailed description of how this parenting behavior is playing out on our culture's youth in higher education. I'm scared to tell this story as I know two parents about to send their kids off to college sit in front of me. She talks about how binge drinking is a quest for authenticity and intensity of experience. It gives young people something all their own to talk about. And sharing stories about the path to passing out has become a primary purpose. It's an inverted world in which drinking to oblivion is the way to feel connected and alive. There is a ritual every university administrator has come to fear. Every fall, parents drop off their well-groomed freshmen, and within 2 or 3 days, many have consumed a dangerous amount of alcohol and placed themselves in harm's way. These kids have been controlled for so long, they just go crazy. Heavy drinking has also become the quickest and easiest way to gain acceptance. Much of collegiate social activity is centered on alcohol consumption, partly because it reduces our anxiety and it requires no social skill. Plus, it provides an instant identity. It lets people know that you are willing to belong. In our world, these are the consequences of our good parenting. When Jesus took a child and put that child in the middle of the disciples, that's what's going on here. Jesus has been having this whole talk with a child right in the middle of disciples. He didn't pick that child up to create some sort of example of innocence. He didn't bring that child in so everyone could have an angelic little cheek to squeeze. In Jesus' day, children did not have any of that ideal surrounding them. In Jesus' day, children were a burden, another mouth to feed. Children were feared because of their erratic behavior. Children were feared because they were seen as more easily open to devil possession. Children were seen as a demonic burden, largely in Jesus' time. We seem to be reverting to an increasingly similar situation. Children today are largely demonized. And how often do we hear that lament from the best-hearted among us? What is wrong with them? But the reality is, we live in a world where there is a girl no more than 3 steps, maybe 2 to 3 steps away from me. That means you know me, I know a person, this person knows this girl. She lives in a school for bad kids. She turned 18 this week. Nobody called her. Not one phone call. 18. So, forgotten by the world already. We've given up on her. She's a failure. But I believe that God creates every child. I believe every child has a spark of the divine. Do you? So if someone as young as 12, 16, even 19 is picking up a weapon to end another's life, what world did we create to let that happen? Because let's face it, scapegoats are easy. Scapegoats are easy to buy into. It's a heck of a lot easier to blame someone else than to look at yourself and do the hard work. And for some time now, as Anne Lamott describes, no one is more sentimentalized in America than mothers on Mother's Day. But no one is more often blamed for our culture's bad people and behavior. It's easy to blame the mothers for all of our woes. But I believe that God makes us all and weaves us all together. Do you? What do your reactions to their behaviors and consequences? What do they say about your beliefs in God? Sarah Maitland believes in a wild, dangerous God. She's obviously a big picture thinker, and she writes, "So it turns out we do not have a little, tame, domestic God. Thank God. But we have a huge, dangerous God. Dangerous, of course, only if we think that God ought to be manageable and safe. A God of almost manic creativity, ingenuity, and enthusiasm. A big enough God who is also a supremely generous and patient God. A God of beauty and chance and solidarity." Sarah continues, "Now I want to move on and look at some of the consequences of a belief in such a God. And I do this in the honest belief that there is no other credible God. It is a God as big and as unmanageable as this, or no God at all. I want to ask myself some so what questions, to look at some of the demands to the ever-confusing and often mystifying behavior of our children. Despite what those of you who have children may secretly think, we all have the ability to love transformingly. Do you believe that? So I have to agree with Anne when she says, my main gripe about Mother's Day is that it feels incomplete and imprecise. The main thing that ever helped mothers was other people mothering them. A chain of mothering that keeps the whole shebang afloat. I am the woman I grew to be, partly in spite of my mother, and partly because of the extraordinary love of her best friends, and my own best friends' mothers, and from surrogates, many of whom weren't even women. So this Mother's Day, this week, this year, help a mom out. Our world is placing some pretty crazy ideals on every parent. Don't let your kids fail, ever. It's the worst thing ever. Don't let them experience pain, or you're a bad parent. Now, y'all know that I have no problem admitting when I have a secret passion for a silly little TV show. I have gotten hooked on this show. It's called The Carrie Diaries, and it's on CW. It is full of simplistically articulated, complex truths about life, all set in that perfect setting for drama that we all can identify shamefully with: high school. Carrie has lost her mom. And now a single father is doing his best to raise his two teenage daughters alone. Scratch that. His two teenage, strong-willed, highly intelligent, frighteningly artistic daughters. The best he can. Luckily, like all of us lucky enough to have eyes to see, he has some help along the way. Larissa, the even more artistic and eccentric boss of Carrie, offers advice. The father feels he's failed, finding his daughter has deceived him. Angry at his failure and fearful for her, he laments, my job is to keep her safe. But like a messenger, Larissa redirects. Your job is to let her become the person she wants to be. I might say it a little differently. Our job is to help them be the person God calls them to be. I do believe we each have a unique call. Do you? And I do have faith that we can be of service to one another in helping us find our call. Do you? Dad goes on to say, I want her to grow up right. What an honest statement. How can we argue with that? But the messenger offers a different way. It's not about right or wrong. It's about her call. Now that is a concept that we need to fight for in a new way as we make our Christian faith true of integrity in this generation. As Morano describes, parents and schools are no longer geared toward child development. They are geared toward academic success. So this Mother's Day, I invite you to let the children bless us so that we may be open to create their world beautifully. Let the children give you this, a new perspective. A new perspective on the most important things in life. It's not perfection. It's not money. And really, as times get tougher, we should all be asking ourselves if we are throwing stumbling blocks with our idolatrous obsession with money. Let the children give you a new perspective on the most important thing in life. It's not perfection, it's not money, it's love. God has it for all of us and asks us to be the hands that enact it. Help the kids be who they think they should be. Offer forgiveness for failures and acknowledge the best in a child, not the worst. Show them the God in them and the love God has for them. Don't let them stumble by believing God doesn't love them. Be God's hands to show it.